It has just been just over a week, but in that time, a new European Union was born. And as shocked and devastated we are with the fact of a war going on in our continent, we are equally proud and humbled by what our Union has achieved in record time, in unity, and in steadfast determination and defense of our common values. This unity was particularly evident at our external borders, with our people opening generously their doors and arms to help those fleeing war from Ukraine. The numbers are telling the story. 700,000 people fled as a consequence of the Yugoslav wars. 1 million Syrians left Syria in 2015-16. And in less than 2 weeks, we have almost 2 million people out of Ukraine. We are now ready to step up to the plate, and we are doing this today with the package we're presenting to you. All people who are fleeing war will be granted protection from and access to the EU health, education, labour and residence, regardless of their nationality, ethnicity or skin colour. And we are today mobilising a significant amount of financial step to make this possible. This is an unequivocal and a very tangible expression of support. Together with my colleagues, we travelled last week to all member states at the first reception line, and we were impressed with the incredibly moving scenes with national officials, civil society and ordinary citizens being present at the border and in train stations, coming to the aid of those arriving from Ukraine. And specifically today, on International Women's Day, I would like to remind that it is primarily women and children arriving alone, and more often than not on foot, dropped off by husbands, fathers and brothers who drive them to the border and then turn back to continue the fight against the Russian aggressors. Despite the pressure, what we saw was an orderly process in place where everyone is welcomed, registered and given the assistance they merit. And we will continue supporting these efforts with a significant amount of money. As announced by the President, at least 500 million from the EU budget is being directed to deal with the humanitarian consequences that Yanis will spell out. Ilva also will explain to you how we propose to prolong the implementation period of Home Affairs instruments that would allow us to spend again around 420 million euros for managing these flows. And with the help of our colleague Elisa Ferreira, we are also making possible to have, through REACT-EU, 100% financing rate of all expenses occurred in this context. So let me finish welcoming once again the efforts of our member states, pledge and reiterate our constant support to the humanity, resilience and the ingenuity of the people of Europe, which has been remarkable, and in these innate European qualities rooted in our values and principles that will guide our way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. Commissioner Lenarčič, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll focus on the situation in Ukraine proper, and in particular on the humanitarian situation, which, as you know, is alarming. And it is such because civilians, particularly in urban centers and in other areas under active combat, are trapped now for days already without water, without electricity, without heating, without food and other basic necessities. And the situation is compounded by the fact that there are massive violations of international humanitarian law being perpetrated by the aggressor, the Russian army. So I want to start with the appeal to the Russian forces. Do not target civilians. Do not destroy the civilian infrastructure and allow humanitarian workers and health workers to do their work freely and safely. We have mobilized, as Vice President Skinas mentioned, 90 million as an initial allocation of humanitarian aid for Ukraine and Moldova. This is a contribution to the United Nations appeal for humanitarian funding. And the good news is that this appeal has been fully funded in few days, if not hours. The problem now is to get the impact of this funding on the ground. We need full access for humanitarian partners of ours to do their work, to reach the people in need and to provide them with the assistance. Another track of our action is the civil protection. We have been working around the clock since day one, since 24 of February, on providing assistance to Ukraine in the framework of EU civil protection mechanism. The response to Ukrainian request for assistance by the EU member states has been extraordinary. 28 European countries, EU member states and other participating states in the Union civil protection mechanism have offered assistance, ranging from shelter items, food, medicines, firefighting equipment, ambulances, power generators, water pumps and the like. The total value of assistance already provided through the civil protection mechanism to Ukraine is well over 100 million euro already. We have set up logistical hubs in Poland, in Romania, shortly also in Slovakia. We have liaison officers on the ground, all in order to channel this unprecedented flow of assistance to the country affected. And we shall continue with this assistance to Ukraine as well as to EU member states and other neighbouring countries, notably Moldova, as long as necessary. This is as long as this illegal aggression on Ukraine continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Johansson, please.
Thank you. Try to be brief. I would like to mention two things. First, about the Temporary Protection Directive, which is a directive that's been existing for more than 20 years and never, ever being used because member states have not been able to agree on that. Now, we have managed last Thursday to have a decision to activate this Temporary Protection Directive for the first time ever in a unanimous decision in the Council. I'm so proud of how member states managed to really get together and take this decision when it was really necessary. With the activation of the Temporary Protection Directive that activated last Friday, means that all people that will come fleeing from Ukraine to the European Union can have the immediate protection with the status to be protected, with the right to social welfare, with the right to health care, with the right for children to go to school, with the right for adults to work. And this is really something that makes a difference for the refugees fleeing to the European Union. This Temporary Protection Directive will be for all Ukrainian citizens and their families, for all recognised refugees in Ukraine that are fleeing from the EU, and also third country nationals that have a long-term residence permit in Ukraine. It will not be applicable for students or short-term residents that are now being evacuated from the Ukraine. We welcome them, we help them to evacuate, but they also have to go back to their countries of origin. The second thing I would like to mention is, as was also already mentioned, 2 million refugees have already entered into the European Union. More than 1 million to Poland, almost 500,000 to Romania, and then also to Slovakia and Hungary. We have to thank the member states that are doing the utmost to welcome them, to the local authorities, to the national authorities, to the NGOs, to the border guards, to all the volunteers, to all the citizens that are really standing there helping people, offering refugees to stay in their homes. You can see the signs where they say at the railway station saying, I can take in one family, I can take 2 people in my home. I think this is really a moment to be proud of being European when we see solidarity in practice. But we also must be aware that this 2 million that we have received now in 12 days is the same number of refugees that the European Union received during 2015 and 2016 together. This is what we have received in 12 days. And more is to come. Putin will not stop. He will go on. More is to come, and it is a huge risk of it's going to be worse. We have to welcome those coming, but we have to do more. We present today in the communication what we have already done, but it's really necessary to step up. And I would like to mention one perspective, and that are the children. We don't know exactly how many children out of those 2 million that have come to the European Union. But what I've seen when I visited the borders, it could be half of those arriving that are children. There's quite a number of children arriving. And you have all seen the pictures of a lonely child coming with a small bag, without any parents, without any relatives. We have the unaccompanied children coming to the European Union. They need protection. And all the children that have come, they need some kind of normality in their lives. They have to go to school. We have to provide with, exceptional possibilities for schooling now, to go to shift in schools or setting up extra schooling facilities, look into whether we have teachers coming from the Ukrainian refugees that can step in. We need to provide more help for the children. And we also need to be aware that there are also people, criminals, that try to use this situation. There's a huge risk of unaccompanied children being victims of trafficking. There is a risk of people, criminals, try to use children, try to have false documents to get them into the European Union with the purpose of selling these children, of trafficking. And this we have to prevent, and we need to do more to protect the children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us take now a couple of questions. Lawrence, please go ahead.
Thank you. Lorenzo Consoli from Asca News Italy. I would like to ask a precision, because you both said, Mrs. Johnson and Vice President Skinas, that the temporary protection will apply to all people coming from Ukraine, except the short-term residents that will be repatriated. Okay. There was an issue with long-term residents in Ukraine that some countries, Hungary, Poland, other countries, Austria, other countries in eastern countries, wanted to treat using their own national asylum law and not the temporary protection. And I understood that the unanimous vote in favor of the directive was also possible because this choice was given to member states to choose to use their own national law with these long-term residents only and not the temporary protection. Using the national law on asylum means that they can be actually they can stay there waiting for the procedures to go on for the asylum, and they don't actually have the temporary protection with the right to, for their children to go to school, the right to be assisted by the health system, etc. So can you please clarify this point? Are these people protected with temporary protection or not? Or have the member states that didn't want this accepted that they are under temporary protection and opt out of the use of the national law? Thank you.
In the Council on last Thursday, there was a really constructive approach. All member states, there were no real hard things going on. They were really trying. You know, we had an extraordinary council on last Sunday. And then in the evening we started to produce this work on the temporary protection directive. Usually when we from the Commission presented a proposal, we reach out to member states in advance to have consultations, to listen to them before we made the proposal. This time we didn't have time for that because of the urgency, so we just presented the proposal. They have very short time to go through it, but even though they managed to adopt it, with some small, negotiations going on during the Council, I think there was really a willingness from all the 27 to really find a good compromise. So I will not, there was no really big issues on this. So the outcome is that third country nationals that have been staying for a long time in Ukraine, where Ukraine is their home, they should be protected now by the Temporary Protection Directive or by the national legislation on an equal term. So that means immediate protection. Then, of course, in addition to the temporary protection, all the people that arrived in the European Union have the right to apply for asylum if they wish to. So this is also, in addition to the temporary protection, an option for people arriving, third country nationals or Ukrainians, to apply for asylum. Very few has done so far, but that might come later.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Yes, we had a second question in the room. Please go ahead.
Hello, Alexander Velmachos from Insider.gr Greece. I would like to ask a question about how does the Commission plan to support, to give extra support to countries such as Greece that already face migrant crisis? That's my question. Thank you.
Let me first say that one has to realize that this is a situation that we have never seen before in terms of the legal instrument that applies. This temporary protection mechanism is a blanket status. That means that it concerns everybody and it allows access everywhere in the European Union. So it is important that in the days and weeks to come, we see how the people who flee war from Ukraine decide to exercise the status given, the protection status given by the European Union. So this means that now we have to face the immediate response of the reception member states where we have the crisis unfolding, and this is why we're coming forward today with this immediate support package of everything that is readily available. So I repeat, thanks to the generosity of the Commission, every expense will be eligible for reimbursement under the EU funding rules. And we will continue supporting access to the services. Now, one we have to see and monitor how these people, once they go through the reception circuit, decide to make their lives and where. And if need be to do more, we will do more. But first things first. So today we concentrate on where the problem is, but if there is need to step up and go beyond today's package, we will. For that, of course, that would require some discussions here in the European Parliament, because, as you know, any budgetary decisions that go beyond the framework agreed in July 2020 would need interinstitutional approval. But our early contacts with the European Parliament point out to this House's readiness to help.
May I add just on Greece? Greece is the member state that received the biggest proportion by far for all member states from the EU funding when it comes to migration. And that's due to the situation of emergency that has been. When I took office, we had 42,000 migrants on the Greek islands, many of them living under totally unacceptable living conditions. We worked very good together with the Greek government, with the Greek authorities, and now we are in a situation with 3,000 migrants on the Greek islands, and it's not in a situation of emergency. That's really good.
Thank you very much. I think I saw one more question here. No, that is okay. Then I'll go to the online questions. David Careta.
Thank you very much. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian Radio. Two questions, if I may. The first one again on the temporary protection directive and the issue of long-term residents and short-term residents. What is the difference between the two categories? Why this choice, except for the fact that the short-term residents could have a black skin, and so it's less welcome in Europe. Second question on the budget. I've read today a paper by Bruegel who estimates that the need for refugees and humanitarian assistance would be 30 billion, 30. How can this be financed by member states without an European scheme or fund or whatever well beyond what you are proposing or the budget, the long-term budget could provide? Thank you.
Okay, I could start, and probably my colleagues can come up later. On your first question, David, the difference between long-term and short-term is long-term people are the people who made their lives in Ukraine. This is what a long-term resident means, that these are people who are there and they have made Ukraine their home. Short-term are people who are in Ukraine for study, for a very period of time, and they have documents that do not make them long-term residents. They're there for a reason, and they are covered also in the sense, and I saw many of them in the Hungarian-Ukrainian border. I talked to them. They were very happy because they, thanks to the protection status, they are now able to safely travel back home. And under no circumstances, of course, I will not dignify this with an answer, but I think I should say that skin color is not a criterion for EU policy. That is universally known. On the budget, I haven't seen the report by Bruegel, but I repeat what I just said a few minutes ago, that if we need to do more, we will do more.
Let me just add on the budget one thing. For us, when it comes to refugees and humanitarian assistance, the central role is being played by the United Nations system. And recently, the United Nations issued a flash appeal amounting to $1.7 billion, of which $550 million for so-called regional refugee response plan. So those people from Ukraine who would find refuge in the first stage in the neighbouring countries. And this appeal has been fully funded. This is the initial stage. Of course, it depends on how long and how far and what dimensions this crisis will assume at the end. But initially, this is the budget from the perspective of the United Nations, and it has been fully funded.
I can just add a last on the people that arrived. What's the difference between short-term and long-term? I think Margrethe Skinas just explained that. Many of the short-term, with the short-term residence permit, are students. They have been studying in Ukraine. They are not in need of international protection. They are students. We are helping them to evacuate them and to give them the first refuge when they come to the European Union. They can get shelter, they get food, they get a warm shower, they get support, and then we contact the country of origin and they are flying in with their planes and pick them up and take them home. And of course, that is what we do. We evacuate all people from Ukraine. They are all welcome to the European Union, but all those that have a home to go to, of course, should be helped to go to their home and not be staying in the European Union.
We'll have to slowly wrap up as we have still another press conference. I'll take the last question from Thomas online, Thomas Kutschka.
Yes, thanks a lot. Good afternoon. I'm a little bit confused about the numbers. The 420 million euros from the previous budget, are they on top of the 500 or are they the bulk of these 500 million euros. And then in the press release, you say that a package of 330 million out of the 500 is being prepared to help refugees in Ukraine and in the region. So I'm just wondering what's the rest, the other 170 or 80 million to be spent upon. And a follow-up, if you will, to David's question. The Commission President has clearly said this is only the first step. Could you give us any idea when the second step is likely to follow? Thanks.
Thank you. Who would like to take that?
I can repeat the figures. I must confess I haven't seen the press release. For some years now I do not draft press releases, so that whatever I ignore cannot hurt me. But on the numbers, on a more serious note, on the numbers, let me again, Thomas, repeat what we are managing in terms of numbers. I think I mentioned it in my introductory statement. As announced by the President, at least 500 million euros from the EU budget is being directed to deal with the humanitarian consequences of war, both within and both inside Ukraine and beyond, exactly as Commissioner Lenarčič presented. Today, in addition, we are proposing to prolong the implementation period of the Home Affairs instruments under the previous multi-annual financial framework, which would have as a consequence to make immediately available 420 million for managing precisely these flows on top of their national programs and emergency funding under the new budget. So basically we are releasing this money that would have otherwise not been available. We are prolonging them so that they are readily available in the current programming period too. And finally, we are harnessing fully the flexibilities embedded in our cohesion policy through the CARE initiative, targeting remaining funds also from the previous MFF with an exceptional co-financing rate of 100%. And this on top of the 10 billion euros from REACT-EU, which is already available in 2022. This means, in essence, that all expenses incurred in managing the situation we have now at the external border will be refundable 100%. So this is the package we're presenting today.
And just to clarify this, the Commission has taken a decision today to prolong the use of the unused money under the previous MFF for AMIF, but also for the cohesion funds, for the social funds. This needs the approval of the co-legislators before it can come into force.
Sorry, and let us repeat that if we need to do more, we will do more.
Thank you very much. I think these are the closing remarks for today. Thank you very much, Vice President, Commissioners. And please stay tuned. We will start in just a moment on the press conference on fighting violence against women.